Hello, cacao lovers, and welcome to another episode of Cacao Culture. I'm your host, Daisy Polanco, and joining me today are Max Wax,
Hello.
seasoned expert in all cacao and chocolate related matters, and live from New York, it's Michael Laiskonis. Welcome, Michael. All right, so today we're going to have a very ample discussion about a lot of topics, I think. I know that Michael wanted to ask us a few questions about how the pandemic has directly and indirectly impacted us in the aspect of farming, farmers, and working with our partners. Maybe Max can kick it off with answering that first burning question.
Yes, it was really challenging in the last 6 or 7 months to cope with the pandemic. We had to reinvent the way we interacted with the farmers and uh, and how we took care of the farmers because they were the most vulnerable of the entire chain, most vulnerable both from a business standpoint because they absolutely need the money so they couldn't stop, and also for sanitary reasons they had least access to sanitary care in general. So what we did was actually reaching out to them and offering more services. We offered, first of all the disinfection material, masks. We did offer as well the what we call the immune tests to make sure they were not affected. We tried to keep them as separated as possible. Luckily, they work in the countryside, so they're not in air conditioned, closed environments, so they're less prone to infection from that point of view.
Mhm.
And the big challenge was the transportation because we had a very severe curfew at the beginning.
Yeah.
We were allowed for circulation only for selected vehicles and between 8 in the morning up to 2 in the afternoon. So we had to help them get rid of the cacao much sooner than they would have under normal conditions, because the farmers normally go to the fields in the morning, they gather the pods, harvest the pods, and put them all together in stacks in one point, and they start opening the pods by 2 or 3 p.m. And the normal transportation occurs in the afternoon until night. So that second part of the day actually was lost. So we were obliged to rent many more vehicles, and vehicles of any sort, even donkeys, mopeds, or whatever was necessary in order to get the cacao off the hands of the farmers much earlier and get to our fermentation center before the curfew.
Yeah.
Apart from that, then I had a problem with our own employees, because at the beginning, you might remember, there was a lot of fear in everybody. So people didn't know what to do, and they would just stand still or stay home, or even take irrational defensive behaviors. So I personally and Hector and senior management had to go to our fermentation center in San Francisco de Macorís and talk truth to the people, and say, listen, this is a very severe situation, but you won't solve that situation by being in a cave with other 50 people. That would be absolutely detrimental. That's not a good behavior. So a good behavior is working here where we are in open air and using your brains, using your intelligence. So keep off people, keep a distance, wash your hands very thoroughly and very frequently. Here you have a disinfection. Here you have your masks. At the beginning, we even gave them sort
The
of
face shields.
face shields and so
Yep.
forth. And we were, I would say, successful in that approach, since out of our 500 employees, I think we had less than 10 persons that were affected
We're
by the
affected.
virus. And we were able to keep working. And we had to keep working, because if we didn't, then we would have affected like 3,000 families. I mean, our effect upstream and downstream would have been terrible. So I would say that in this respect, we managed to keep the car going and the business going for the benefit of everybody involved.
How have things been in New York, Michael?
Well, I mean, with regard to ICE, the school, we were closed for a good 4 or 5 months before reopening just for our professional programs. Um, but as you might know, we're known for recreational and professional development programs where thousands of people are coming in every year. So the traffic is greatly reduced. So that's delayed me a little bit into getting back into the chocolate lab myself, but I'm back. And we're, just as everyone is adapting and thinking of new ways to do what we normally do. Now going back to what Max was saying, I found the transportation, the local transportation issue really fascinating, because that's probably something that a lot of people wouldn't even consider. I've been kind of doing this ongoing survey of what's happening around the world and noticing different responses and different origins. And I was, I guess, maybe not surprised, but I did notice a common thread, whether talking to people in South and Central America, the Caribbean, even in Africa, that there is this general consensus that the rural farming communities are less impacted, which sounds to be the case there in the Dominican Republic. But also, I guess, cautioning that it's often those communities to have maybe less access to healthcare should things spread into those communities. Would you agree with that generally?
You mean that rural communities have less access to healthcare?
Yeah.
Well, let's say that we are in such a difficult condition throughout the entire country that I would not say that they're in a worse situation. We have very few available beds in the entire country. So our measures need to be absolutely proactive in order to avoid people going to hospitals. It was calculated that there are just as little as 500 intensive care beds in the entire country. So we cannot afford to be too ill to go to the hospitals. We have to take measures in order to, of course, first prevent infection, and then, if possible, giving care to the people without having them go to the hospitals.
Yeah, in the beginning, obviously, it was chaos because as the whole world saw, we were dealing with something that we didn't know how it was being spread, how we could attack it, what was the treatment for it. So at the beginning, it was complete madness. Hospitals were flooded with people. A lot of people were sick, were dying because we didn't know what we were dealing with. Essentially, we didn't know how to treat it. We didn't know that we could treat people in their homes, for example, or what was an effective course of action. But I think that now, as time has passed, we have kind of reached a certain protocol that people in hospitals are following when someone gets sick. And there's a lot of there's this kind of triage in a way, who has to stay in the hospital and who can continue treatment at home.
Exactly.
So this has
that's
helped
key.
a lot.
And that's key.
Yeah.
Because at the beginning, the first reaction is, I'm ill, I'm gonna die, I'm going to the hospital.
Yeah. That was the initial response. You would hear someone
reaction.
cough, and then people would go crazy.
Go to the hospital.
You're gonna die. Go to a hospital. People started saying goodbye before they knew anything.
Mhm.
But now, things are. We're still dealing with a lot of issues, but like I said, there's a better protocol in place now, and we're seeing the positive aspect of it.
I was one of those lucky 300 or 400 people who attended, I guess you could say, your live tour of your main facility there. What kind of mitigation efforts now do you find, at the post-harvest side of things?
Well, we were discussing this in another episode. Throughout the entire pandemic, there has been a lot of negative, obviously, but one of the positive things that we've had is that we've been able to use technology to reach a completely new set of people, and just so many more people. This live tour was the best example by far. of people coming into our facility and seeing, like firsthand the work we do.
And by the way, that was the very first time we actually revealed our entire production cycle.
Yes,
We've
which
kept
was
it more or
also,
less secret for like 15 years.
yeah.
And all
So
of a
we were.
sudden, we felt that we had to reach out to people and to open up, to have them participate and be part of it.
So, as you could tell, the Post Harvest Center is essentially an open space in the countryside. And we have reduced the amount of staff that is on a shift. So, there's less people working per shift, and they're implementing the security and health protocols in order to avoid spreading infections or getting into contact with people that might be infected. So there's a lot of controls at beginning at the first point of access to the post harvest facility. So that's one of the things that we do.
Yes, and surprisingly enough, it worked. Latin people
Yes.
are not famous for their discipline and for sticking to the rules. But I believe, seeing what happened in Europe, that we behave better than the French and the Italians.
We have been very surprised in a positive way because Dominicans, especially, are not known for organization, protocols,
And they're super,
none of
super
this.
sociable.
So,
They would hug and kiss and kiss twice and, love to be together. And it did actually work. You find it very strange, but in public transportation, a car or a van that would have been normally uh, flooded with like 50 people, uh, it's the maximum allowed, I think, is 50% of the normal occupancy.
yeah, so
And they're
people
respecting
wear
that.
their masks, they're respectful, they're keeping their distance,
Mhm.
they're doing their lines, they're waiting, they're patient, something that we've never seen before.
And we've been in a curfew situation since the end of February, and we're
Yes.
still in a curfew, and we got used to it.
Yeah, so people have learned to live with this, and there's obviously sometimes the rebels,
Ah,
but but within
but not like in England, people raging, taking their clothes off.
yeah, we haven't had any
No,
riots,
no, no riots, no rage, no nothing.
not even in this election year.
Mhm.
So things have been kind of positive in that aspect.
Mhm.
Yeah, I mean, New York is the same. Life happens in the streets here.
Hmm.
Maybe a little less now, but I from what I see, yeah, it's everybody's kind of taking responsibility, and that's a great thing. Um, Another thing that I've been kind of thinking about in terms of, cocoa is from a maker's perspective, um, it's a long game. So for at least the past few months, there have been warehouses that have been full of cocoa beans. So there wasn't an immediate shock to that. But how would you maybe explain the sort of international shipping and warehousing situation, and how the pandemic has affected that, and how it might affect the future more than it's affecting the present or the last few months?
Mm. Well, in terms of shipping, to tell you the truth, we didn't have much difficulties at all. The vessels have been calling at the ports regularly, and at least for the destinations we send the cacao to, which is Europe, the entire
Hmm.
Europe, Northern Europe, the Middle East, and Japan, that we have suffered no disruptions at all. So there was no problem there. The Also, our customers have been able to react. They have been very resilient, and was the entire market. So we haven't lost significant any say figure sales figure or anything like that. The only market that actually suffered was Japan. It's because of their distribution. They distribute chocolate almost exclusively through convenience stores, and convenience stores that are normally very crowded in Tokyo and the big cities have gone deserted. So they have seen their figures go south double digit, and they already told us that next year, 2021, they're going to buy much less from us or from
We
anybody
have
for that
been
matter.
lucky in the sense that, as you got to see on that live tour, we handle our entire process from the moment we receive those cacao beans to the final exported bags. So and we also have our warehouse in New York, and we have our store in New York. So we've been very, very lucky. Well, that's strategic thinking, obviously,
Hmm.
from from before, but we've been very lucky in that sense because also on a government level, on a state level, from the beginning of the pandemic, one of the areas where they paid a lot of attention to was export, how to continue with exports and how to keep this part of the economy going, because it's one of the main sectors that brings in money for the Dominican Republic, um, as opposed to tourism, which suffered greatly. So now with tourism, we're kind of slowly getting back into it with all these new measures and
Hmm.
incentives from the government, but they were shut down for quite some months. So, going back to what Max was saying, we've been lucky in that sense that because we've seen a lot of chocolate makers that have had to close down their factories. But on another hand, chocolate consumption in the US has increased so much. And we've been able to reach new crowds as chocolate makers because
Hmm.
we are able to reach new people. So maybe I had two or three people going into the actual physical store and perhaps buying our chocolates, but the entire crowd that we're able to reach through social media, our website, and all of these outlets is much greater, and they get to see a whole range of products. And since they're already purchasing one thing, they add more things to their cart. So that's a big plus too.
Yeah, so one of our customers, Barry Callebaut, told us that their figures have gone up also thanks to the fact that people are staying at home and they're making chocolate and they're baking a lot. I don't know if that's just more or less the same in New York, but I guess there might be a component of that as well.
Yeah, I mean, everyone is saying that if they hadn't already had a strong online sales presence,
Hmm.
they definitely have built one up. Um, and it's interesting. I even asked some people that supply small quantities of beans for the amateur home enthusiasts, and they say sales are up too. So I think in addition to
Hmm.
making sourdough bread or whatever cooking product, maybe
The famous banana bread that
Uh,
everyone was
we have
making.
some
mhm.
countertop uh, chocolate being made during this time as well.
Yeah.
Um, and I mean, I do find that maybe consumer behavior changing. Um, One thing I've also, I mean, it seems kind of inconceivable to look for silver linings at this early stage. Um, but with all this sort of necessary innovation that's taking place again across all sectors of the supply chain, um, are there any positives that have emerged that will help us in the future or that we'll use in the future? I mean, you mentioned just the way we communicate now and technology has
Mhm.
has changed a lot of things.
Yes, and there is also one thing we have done already, like 3 online tastings.
Hmm.
People seem to be more curious about experimenting and tasting and sharing their impressions than before.
Yeah. I think that for us as a brand that started with an initial goal to educate consumers, not just on the final product, but everything that comes before with cacao and our post harvest process, it has definitely been a very positive thing in the sense that the entire world has kind of slowed down,
Exactly. It's as
taken a
if
moment to
we had
breathe.
eliminated a background noise,
Yeah.
and people were more focused and more concentrated in their own stuff, in themselves, in their homes, in their families,
And
and
their
also in their taste
routines.
buds.
Yeah, and the routines, and no one had time for anything. It was just rush, rush, rush.
You know, they're reading more,
Yeah, so
they're
people.
watching less television,
Yeah.
they're using their minds, hopefully, in a more active and proactive manner, and they're tasting.
Yeah, so
We have a
when you
tasting this afternoon, don't we?
we have a tasting this
For
afternoon.
example, yeah.
um so people are keen on these webinars and live tours and interviews
Yes,
and
I
podcasts.
would have never imagined that we would have 300 plus attendees to watch a fermentation center, something that
Yeah,
even myself, I wouldn't be doing that for 2 hours. But they did,
exactly.
and we're interested. And after that, all the Q&A and the emails that we received.
Yeah, so from that activity, we got such good response
Mhm.
that we had a lot of people asking us if we could do it again
Yes.
for private customers, for specific
The
chocolate
German
makers.
Chocolate Association
So we
stuff,
were
they,
invited
they wanted
to,
one bespoke, made to measure for them.
yeah, so we were invited to a German chocolate festival, which we were able to attend right from Max's office, which was bizarre, but we did it.
Mhm.
And I mean, on that live tour, we just had, I mean, we had Hector Rizek, for God's sake. Usually his agenda is unbelievable. And he gave us
Like 1 hour
two
of his
hours,
time. two
was it?
hours,
Like
yes.
2 hours just
Mhm.
answering questions. And he was just, I mean, we were all accessible and more than happy to share the knowledge that usually is so difficult to showcase.
Mhm.
I mean, usually we go to trade shows and we're just carrying brochures of like 5 pages where we have to demonstrate, yes, we're the best because our post harvest is amazing. But, people are kind of taking our word for it. But with this live tour, people were able to see the entire structure, the people that work there, who's on our team, what we do.
Mhm.
And I don't know, it was for us, it was like a once in a lifetime experience,
Mhm.
but we get to repeat it whenever we want.
Mhm.
I mean, I
Precisely.
can totally relate to that. Kind of going from 60 miles per hour to zero in a very
Mhm.
short amount of time, and realizing, okay, this is a great opportunity to do all of that reading and research and writing and all of that stuff that I never had time to do.
Yeah.
In
Mhm.
the and yes, I mean, on a daily basis, my email inbox is invitations to various webinars and panel discussions, it's ironic that I've almost seen people, at least virtually, many more times than I would ever see them in person, once a year at a conference somewhere.
Exactly. For
So I
sure.
think that sense of community has been really interesting, seeing that kind of be empowered. Um, and I'm certainly learning a lot.
Yeah, by
Um,
all means.
Yeah, us too.
By all means.
it also allows us to travel when we can't travel.
Hmm.
Um, I mean, I think we've discussed this before when we've talked that one of the very formative moments in my own perspective on chocolate actually happened um, about 10 years ago when I visited Las Esmeraldas
Mhm.
in the Dominican Republic. And that was really one of the first times I came up close and personal. So we can't travel to farms and to origins and see this, but you kind of opening yourself up has been really great.
Yeah, we're very happy to hear that the entire chocolate, the chocolate lovers and the chocolate makers are really appreciating this because it's such an important part. And for us to be able to share something that at the beginning of this year seemed like something that we would never be able to do because of the things that how things were developing with this pandemic, has been such a great opportunity on that aspect. Being able to reach out to so many people and speaking to so many different people about so many different topics
Mhm.
has been great, really great.
It's like going back in time when people used to write letters
Yeah.
to friends and relatives and to pay attention to
Yeah.
them, to dedicate some time to this human contact. Paradoxically, we can travel, but we can be closer.
Yeah, we have to be distant, but we have been
Mm.
brought more together, I guess.
Mhm.
And it's a strange paradox, but that's the
Mhm.
world we're living in now.
Well, my own sort of bubble of travel is still pretty limited, but I have to get to Williamsburg soon to pay a visit to the shore.
To your friend Damien, he's in a
Of
very
course.
creative way right now. He just came out with like 5 or 6 new creations. They're
Hmm.
all delicious. We'll make sure you receive them.
Yes, you have to try those new chocolate bars that he's been experimenting with. We're going to launch some new stuff for the holiday season. We'll make sure you get some of those too. So are you teaching now at the no?
No, so my role now, again, we are the traffic coming into the building is still very, very limited. So I'm just back at a very, very reduced level, creating some content, and I'll start making some chocolate again. And until we can open up a little bit more, kind of share that experience as much as we can through outlets like these and other streams of content. That's kind of where we are.
Good.
Well, I want to thank you both for all of the amazing insight that you have provided and for sharing your experiences with cacao and chocolate throughout the pandemic. Be sure to follow Michael on social media. His Instagram handle is at @m_laiskonis. Max, we have to get you active on Instagram too.
Okay.
But for the meantime, you can follow us at cacao_USA. We don't just love to ask questions, we love getting them too. So be sure to email us if you have any questions or you're interested in collaborating with us. You can write to us at info@cacao.com. But wait, there's more, like the infamous infomercials. We have created a coupon code for all of the cacao lovers. Be sure to go to our online store and add the coupon code CULTURE at checkout for a 10% discount that applies to all orders and all products. Cacao is a one-stop shop for chocolate makers and chocolate lovers in quest for the finest ingredients for their creations. Thank you so much.